You didn't ask to be born, and honestly, nobody warned you it was going to be this hard. Look, if you've been watching my stuff on existentialism, you know the whole deal about being thrown into existence without a manual, without meaning, just dropped into this world and told to figure it out. That's the Western philosophy angle, right? Sartre, Camus, all those guys smoking cigarettes in like Parisian cafes talking about the absurdity of life. But here's what's wild. Over in the East, they've been dealing with the exact same problem for like 2,000 years longer. Except they don't call it being thrown into existence, they call it being thrown into samsara. And honestly, their answer might be way more useful than just accepting the absurd and moving on. So in this video, we're going to explore how Buddhism and Advaita Vedanta, these ancient Eastern philosophies, look at the same existential dread you're feeling right now and offer a completely different way out. We're talking about why you suffer, why you keep suffering, and how to actually stop suffering. Not just accept it, actually end it. And trust me, by the end of this, you're going to see your anxiety, your depression, your whole sense of meaninglessness in a totally different light. Let me paint you a picture. You wake up, you check your phone, you see 100 things demanding your attention. Your boss wants something, your friends are posting their highlight reels on social media, your family has expectations, and somewhere deep down you're thinking, what's the point of all this? Why am I doing any of this? And that question, that deep, uncomfortable question, that's existential dread. That's the feeling that maybe none of this matters, that you're just going through the motions, that life is just one random event after another with no deeper meaning. Now, Western existentialism has an answer to this. Sartre says you're condemned to be free. There's no God, no cosmic plan, no instruction manual. You just exist, and you have to create your own meaning. Camus says life is absurd, so you got to imagine yourself happy even while pushing that boulder up the hill over and over. It's about rebellion, about saying, screw it, I'll make my own meaning even though the universe doesn't care. And look, there's something powerful about that. There's something liberating about realizing you can choose your own path. But let's be real for a second. How's that working out for most people? Because from what I can see, people are more anxious than ever, more depressed than ever, more medicated than ever. We've got all this freedom, all these choices, and somehow we're more miserable. We're throwing ourselves into careers, relationships, hobbies, trying to create meaning, and it's like we're running on a treadmill. We get one thing, we want the next thing. We achieve a goal, the happiness lasts maybe a week, and then we're back to feeling empty. So here's where Eastern philosophy comes in with a totally different take. Buddhism and Advaita Vedanta look at this same problem and say, yeah, you were thrown into existence without asking for it, but it's not just existence, it's samsara. And samsara is basically the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, the endless wheel of suffering. Now, before you click away thinking this is going to be some woo-woo spiritual thing, hang on, because whether you believe in literal reincarnation or not, the concept of samsara is describing something you experience every single day. Samsara isn't just about being reborn in different bodies over multiple lifetimes. It's about the cycle of craving and suffering that happens in your mind constantly. You want something, you get it, you feel good for a moment, then you want something else. That's samsara. You're stuck in a loop. You think getting that promotion will make you happy, you get it, 2 weeks later you're stressed about the next level. You think finding the right relationship will complete you, you find someone, 6 months later you're arguing about who forgot to buy milk. This is the cycle. This is being trapped. The Buddha figured this out 2,500 years ago when he was a prince named Siddhartha. And here's the thing, this guy had everything, literally everything. Wealth, palaces, beautiful wife, healthy kids, servants, the works. And he was miserable. He looked around and realized that no matter how much comfort and pleasure he had, there was still suffering. People got sick, people got old, people died, nothing lasted. Every happy moment eventually ended. And he thought, there's gotta be more than this. There's gotta be a way out. So he left his palace, became a monk, tried all the extreme practices like starving himself and meditating until he almost died, and eventually sat under a tree and said, I'm not moving until I figure this out. And that's when he got enlightened. That's when he saw the truth of existence. And the first thing he taught after that, the Four Noble Truths. And these four truths are basically the diagnosis and cure for existential dread. The first noble truth is that life is dukkha. Now, dukkha gets translated as suffering, but it's more subtle than that. It's unsatisfactoriness. It's the feeling that something's always slightly off. Even when things are good, there's this underlying anxiety that it won't last. You're at a great party, having fun, and in the back of your mind, you know it's going to end. You're in love, everything's perfect, but you're low-key worried they'll leave you or the feelings will fade. That's dukkha. It's not just pain, it's the fact that even pleasure is tinged with impermanence and anxiety. And here's where it connects to existentialism. Western philosophy says life is absurd and meaningless, so you're free to create your own meaning. Eastern philosophy says life is suffering because you're attached to things that can't last, so you're never truly free until you let go. Both are saying there's something fundamentally unsatisfactory about existence as we normally experience it. But the solutions are different. The second noble truth is the origin of suffering, and this is huge. The Buddha says suffering comes from tanha, which means craving or thirst. It's the deep desire for things to be different than they are. You crave pleasure, you crave existence, you crave non-existence when things get bad. You crave recognition, success, love, security, all of it. And the craving itself is the problem, not the things you want, but the desperate grasping, the addiction to getting and keeping and controlling. Think about it. Why do you suffer when someone criticizes you? Because you're craving approval. Why do you suffer when you're alone? Because you're craving connection. Why do you suffer when you're not achieving enough? Because you're craving validation. The craving is the root, and as long as you're craving, you're stuck in samsara, you're stuck on the wheel. The third noble truth is that there's a way to end suffering, and this is called nirvana. Now, nirvana literally means to extinguish or blow out, like blowing out a candle. You're extinguishing the fires of craving, aversion, and delusion. You're stepping off the wheel. And this isn't about becoming an emotionless robot, it's about freedom, true freedom. Not the Sartrean freedom to choose your own meaning, but freedom from the need for meaning in the first place. Freedom from the constant anxiety and grasping. A state where you're just present, at peace, no longer driven by this desperate need to be different or have more or become something. And the fourth noble truth is the path to get there. The Buddha laid out the Eightfold Path, which is basically a guide for living in a way that reduces suffering and leads to liberation. It includes things like right understanding, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. Basically, it's about training your mind and living ethically so you stop creating more suffering for yourself and others. Now, let's bring in Advaita Vedanta, which is another Eastern philosophy that approaches this from a slightly different angle. Advaita means non-dual. It's the idea that the separation you feel between yourself and the world, between your individual self and everything else, is an illusion. You think you're this separate person, this ego, this identity bouncing around in a world of other separate things. But Advaita says that's Maya, that's illusion. The truth is that there's only one reality, one consciousness, and you are that. The real you isn't your thoughts or your body or your personality. The real you is the awareness in which all those things appear. There's this famous phrase in the Upanishads, the ancient Hindu texts, Tat Tvam Asi. That means, thou art that. You are the divine. You are the ultimate reality. Not your ego, but the consciousness that's aware of your ego. And when you realize this, when you see through the illusion of separation, you're free. Because if you're not really this limited individual struggling to survive and find meaning, then there's nothing to fear. There's no existential dread because the existential problem was based on a misunderstanding of who you are. So here's how this all connects. Western existentialism says you're thrown into a meaningless universe, you're radically free, and you have to create your own meaning through your choices. And there's some truth there. But it puts all the burden on you. You're Atlas holding up the weight of your own meaning, constantly trying to justify your existence through achievements and relationships and experiences. And honestly, it's exhausting. Eastern philosophy says you were thrown into samsara, yes, but the problem isn't that life is meaningless. The problem is that you're chasing meaning in all the wrong places. You're looking for happiness in temporary things. You're trying to build a permanent identity out of impermanent experiences. You're suffering because you don't understand the nature of reality and your own mind. And here's the kicker. The solution isn't to create more meaning, it's to see through the need for meaning. It's to realize that the self that's suffering isn't even real in the way you think it is. When you stop identifying with your thoughts and emotions and start identifying with the awareness that witnesses them, the existential dread starts to dissolve. Not because you found some cosmic purpose, but because you've realized you were never actually lost in the first place. Let me give you a practical example. You're scrolling through social media and you see someone living what looks like a perfect life. Big house, happy family, exotic vacations, whatever. And you feel inadequate. You feel like you're failing at life. That's dukkha. That's suffering. Now, the existentialist response might be to say, their life isn't inherently more meaningful than yours, so define your own success and create your own values. Which is fine, but you're still caught in the comparison game. You're still defining yourself against others. The Buddhist response would be to notice the craving. Notice that you're craving to be seen as successful. Notice the aversion to feeling inadequate. Notice that these feelings arise and pass away. They're not permanent. They're not who you are. And as you practice mindfulness, as you watch your mind instead of being lost in it, the feelings lose their power. You start to see that you're not your thoughts. You're the space in which thoughts happen. And that space is always peaceful, always free, no matter what's happening. The Advaita Vedanta response would be to question the very idea that you're a separate self who needs to be successful. Who is it that feels inadequate? Can you find that person? If you look for the self, the I that's suffering, where is it? Is it in your body? Is it in your thoughts? And when you really investigate, you find that the separate self is just a collection of thoughts and sensations. There's no solid, permanent you that's failing at life. There's just awareness and various experiences arising in awareness. And awareness itself is never inadequate. It just is. Now, I know this might sound abstract or philosophical, and you might be thinking, okay, that's cool, but how does this help me with my actual problems? I've got bills to pay, relationships to manage, a career to figure out. I can't just meditate my way out of real-world issues. And you're right. This isn't about bypassing your problems or pretending they don't exist. But here's the thing. Most of your suffering isn't actually caused by your problems. It's caused by your relationship to your problems. You're not suffering because you have to work. You're suffering because you're resisting work, or you're attached to work defining your worth, or you're anxious about whether you're working enough. You're not suffering because you're single. You're suffering because you're craving a relationship, or you're ashamed of being alone, or you're constantly comparing yourself to people who are coupled up. The external situation is neutral. The suffering comes from the stories you tell about it, the meanings you attach to it, the ways you identify with it. And this is where Eastern practices like meditation and self-inquiry become incredibly practical, because they train you to observe your mind, to catch yourself in the act of creating suffering. You start to see the gap between what's actually happening and the narrative you're spinning about it. And in that gap, there's freedom, there's choice. Not the existential choice of creating meaning, but the choice to not get hooked by your thoughts and emotions, the choice to respond rather than react. There's actually research backing this up. Studies on mindfulness meditation show that it reduces anxiety, depression, and stress. It improves emotional regulation. And here's what's interesting. It doesn't work by changing your circumstances. It works by changing your relationship to your circumstances. You're training your brain to be less reactive, less caught up in rumination and worry. You're literally rewiring the neural pathways that create suffering. One study from Johns Hopkins University analyzed 47 meditation studies and found that mindfulness meditation programs showed moderate evidence of improving anxiety and depression. Another study from Harvard found that 8 weeks of mindfulness training actually changed brain structure, increasing gray matter density in areas associated with learning, memory, and emotional regulation, while decreasing it in the amygdala, the part of the brain associated with fear and stress. But let's go deeper into the philosophy here, because this is where it gets really interesting. In existentialism, you're dealing with what philosophers call thrownness, Heidegger's concept of Geworfenheit. You're thrown into existence without your consent, into a specific time, place, body, family, culture, all of it. And you have to make sense of it. You have to take responsibility for your life, even though you didn't choose the starting conditions. It's like being thrown into the middle of a game without knowing the rules and being told you have to play anyway. And that creates what Sartre called anguish, the anguish of freedom. Because if there's no predetermined meaning, then every choice is on you. You can't blame God or fate or destiny. You're radically responsible. And that's heavy. That's a burden. Some people find it empowering, but a lot of people find it terrifying. It's why people fall into bad faith, Sartre's term for lying to yourself about your freedom. You pretend you have to do things. You hide behind roles and social expectations. You act like you're not free because freedom is too scary. Now, Buddhism would say, yes, you're thrown into existence, but existence itself is characterized by three marks: anicca, dukkha, and anatta: impermanence, suffering, and non-self. Everything is constantly changing, nothing lasts. Suffering is inherent because you're trying to find stability in an unstable world. And there's no permanent self that's experiencing all this. The self is just a process, a collection of constantly changing physical and mental phenomena. The Buddha called it the five aggregates: form, sensation, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. That's all you are. No soul, no essence, no permanent identity, just a process that's happening. And if you really get this, if you really see that there's no permanent self, then who's suffering? Who's thrown into existence? The existential crisis dissolves because the subject of the crisis doesn't exist in the way you thought it did. You've been like a character in a movie who suddenly becomes aware they're a character and starts having an existential crisis about the meaning of their existence. But they're not real, they're just pixels on a screen. The awareness watching the movie is real, but the character is just appearance. Advaita Vedanta takes this even further. It says that not only is the individual self an illusion, but the entire world of separate objects is an illusion. There's only Brahman, the ultimate reality, the one consciousness, and the individual soul, what they call Atman, is identical to Brahman. You're already the ultimate reality. You've just forgotten. You've gotten lost in the dream of separation. And the spiritual path is about waking up, not becoming something you're not, but recognizing what you've always been. There's a famous analogy in Advaita. You're walking in dim light and you see a snake on the path. Your heart races, you freeze, you're terrified. But then someone brings a light and you see it's not a snake, it's a rope. The snake was never real, it was misperception. And the moment you see it's a rope, the fear disappears instantly. You don't have to kill the snake or run away from the snake, you just see clearly and the problem vanishes. That's what enlightenment is in Advaita, seeing clearly. Seeing that the separate self was never real. Seeing that you were never actually thrown into existence because there's no separate you to be thrown anywhere. There's just existence itself, being and knowing itself through infinite forms. And right now, it's being and knowing itself as you. But you are not separate from it. You are it. So let's talk about practical implications. How do you actually apply this? Because it's one thing to talk about non-duality and emptiness of self, and another thing to live it. And the truth is, this isn't something you just intellectually understand and then you're done. It's a practice, it's a path. The Buddha didn't just have one insight and become enlightened. He spent years training his mind. And even after his awakening, he taught for 40 more years, because living this truth is an ongoing process. The first step is to start watching your mind, just basic mindfulness. Throughout your day, try to catch yourself when you're lost in thought, when you're worrying about the future or replaying the past, when you're judging yourself or others, when you're craving or resisting. Just notice it. Don't try to stop it or change it, just observe. This is what meditation trains you to do. You sit, you watch your breath or whatever your anchor is, and when your mind wanders, you notice and come back. You're building the muscle of awareness. And as you do this more and more, you start to realize something profound. You are not your thoughts. You're the one watching your thoughts. Your thoughts are like clouds passing through the sky of your awareness, and the sky is never disturbed by the clouds. It doesn't matter if the clouds are beautiful or ugly, peaceful or stormy. The sky remains vast and open. That's your true nature. That's what you are underneath all the mental noise. The second step is to investigate suffering. When you're suffering, don't just try to distract yourself or make it go away. Look at it. What are you actually experiencing? Where is it in your body? What thoughts are accompanying it? What are you believing in this moment that's causing pain? Usually you'll find it's some version of things should be different than they are. I shouldn't be alone. I should be more successful. They shouldn't have said that. Life should be fair. This shouldn't be happening. That thought, that resistance to what is, that's the suffering. And here's the paradox. When you stop resisting your suffering and just allow it to be there, it often starts to dissolve on its own. Not because you're suppressing it, but because you're not creating a problem out of it. Pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. Pain is the physical or emotional sensation. Suffering is the story you add to it, the meaning you make about it, the way you fight against it. The third step is to question identity. Who are you really? Are you your job? No, because you could lose your job and you'd still be here. Are you your relationships? No, because people come and go. Are you your beliefs? No, because those change over time. Are you your body? No, because your body is constantly changing. Every cell in your body gets replaced over time. Are you your thoughts? No, because thoughts come and go. So who are you? What remains constant through all the changes? And if you really investigate this, you'll find that the only thing that remains constant is awareness itself, the knowing that all these experiences are happening. That's who you are. That's what you've always been. Now, here's where this gets really practical for dealing with existential dread. When you're in the grip of anxiety about the meaninglessness of life, you're identified with a thought. There's a thought that says, "My life has no meaning." And then there's a contraction, a feeling of dread in your body. And then more thoughts pile on. What's the point? Why am I doing this? Nothing matters. And you spiral. You're completely lost in the content of your thoughts. But if you've trained yourself to be mindful, you can catch this happening. You can notice, oh, there's a thought about meaninglessness, and there's a feeling of dread. And you can observe them instead of being them. And in that moment of observation, you're already free, because you're the space in which these thoughts and feelings appear. You're not the thoughts and feelings themselves, and that space is inherently peaceful. It doesn't need meaning, it doesn't need validation, it just is. This is what the Buddhists call emptiness or sunyata. It's not that nothing exists, it's that nothing exists independently with its own inherent nature. Everything is empty of separate self-existence, including you. And when you realize this, when you see that you're not a solid, separate self trying to survive in a hostile universe, the existential terror loses its grip, because there's no one to be threatened. There's just this open awareness, this presence, and life flowing through it. Let me give you another angle on this. In Western psychology, there's this concept of the default mode network. It's a network of brain regions that becomes active when you're not focused on the outside world, when you're just daydreaming or thinking about yourself. And research has shown that activity in the default mode network is associated with depression, anxiety, and rumination. When this network is really active, you're caught up in self-referential thinking. I, me, mine, my problems, my identity, my future, my past. You're lost in the story of me. Now, what's fascinating is that studies on experienced meditators show decreased activity in the default mode network. Meditation literally quiets the part of your brain that's constantly constructing and maintaining this sense of self. And when that quiets down, people report feeling more connected, more peaceful, less identified with their thoughts and emotions. They're experiencing what the Eastern philosophies have been pointing to for thousands of years, a way of being that's not centered on the ego, not driven by craving and fear. So here's the contrast. Western existentialism says you're thrown into a meaningless universe, and the solution is to heroically create meaning through your choices and commitments. You're Sisyphus, and you must imagine yourself happy while pushing that boulder. It's about defiance, about saying, I'll make this meaningful even though it's not. And there's something admirable about that. But it's also exhausting. You're constantly having to prop up meaning, constantly having to justify your existence, constantly having to achieve and become and prove yourself. Eastern philosophy says you're thrown into samsara, and the solution is to wake up from the dream, to see that the self that's suffering isn't real, to stop chasing temporary pleasures and trying to build a permanent identity out of impermanent things. To realize that your true nature is already free, already at peace, already complete. Nothing needs to be added, nothing needs to be achieved. You just need to stop overlooking what's already here. And look, I'm not saying you should just quit your job and meditate in a cave. The Buddha tried extreme asceticism and realized it didn't work. He taught the middle way. Live your life, have relationships, work, do your thing, but do it from a place of awareness instead of compulsion. Do it because you choose to, not because you're desperately trying to fill a void or prove your worth. Do it with the understanding that nothing you do or don't do changes your fundamental nature. You're already whole. The peace you're seeking isn't in the future when you achieve your goals. It's here, now, in the awareness that's reading these words. This is also why Eastern philosophy has a different take on death. In existentialism, death is this terrifying possibility that gives life urgency. Heidegger says being toward death is what makes authentic existence possible. You're gonna die, so you better make your life count. But there's still this underlying anxiety. Death is the ultimate negation, the end of meaning, the void that swallows everything you've built. In Buddhism, death is just part of the cycle. If you don't wake up, you'll die and be reborn and suffer again, round and round. But if you do wake up, if you achieve liberation, then death is just another transition. The body dies, but consciousness continues in some form, or merges back into the ultimate reality, depending on which school of thought you follow. Either way, death isn't this absolute ending. It's just change, which is all that ever happens anyway. Everything is always dying and being reborn. Every moment you're different than you were the moment before. So what's the big deal about the final death of this particular body? In Advaita Vedanta, death is even less of an issue because you're not the body to begin with. You're the eternal awareness in which bodies appear and disappear. Bodies are born and die. Awareness doesn't. It's timeless. So realizing your true nature as awareness means you've already transcended death, not in some future heaven, but right now. You see that what you really are was never born and will never die. Now, I want to address something because I know some of you are thinking, this sounds like spiritual bypassing, like just telling people to meditate away their problems instead of dealing with real issues. And that's a fair criticism. There are people who use spirituality to avoid uncomfortable emotions or difficult situations. That's not what I'm talking about here. Real Buddhist practice involves facing your suffering directly. The Buddha's first teaching was, life is suffering. He didn't say ignore it or transcend it without looking at it. He said, understand it, investigate it, see where it comes from. The path includes ethical conduct, which means taking responsibility for your actions and their consequences. It includes right livelihood, which means engaging with the world in a way that doesn't harm others. This isn't about checking out, it's about waking up to how you create suffering for yourself and others and choosing differently. And in Advaita Vedanta, yes, the ultimate teaching is that you are the absolute reality and the world is an illusion, but the practice involves discernment. You have to distinguish between what's real and what's appearance. You can't just sit around saying it's all an illusion and therefore nothing matters. You're still living in the relative world. You still have a body that needs food. You still have relationships that need care. The non-dual realization doesn't negate the relative, it just puts it in perspective. You engage fully with life, but you're not deceived by it. You know the game is a game, but you play it well. So, this brings us to the climax, the key insight that ties everything together. Whether you're coming from Western existentialism or Eastern philosophy, you're dealing with the same fundamental human condition. You're aware of your own existence. You're aware that you're going to die. You're aware that you're separate from others, from the world. And this awareness creates anxiety. It creates a sense of something being wrong or missing. It creates the need to do something, to become something, to matter somehow. The Western response is to say, yes, it's absurd, but you're free, so make the best of it. Create your own meaning, choose yourself, be authentic. And that's one way to go. But the Eastern response is to say, that separation you feel, that's the root of all suffering. And it's not even true. It's a misunderstanding. You're not actually separate. You're not actually thrown into existence as a foreign entity. You are existence itself, temporarily forgetting what it is, playing hide and seek with itself. And the path to liberation is remembering, waking up, seeing through the illusion. And you do that through practice, through meditation, self-inquiry, ethical living, studying the teachings, being part of a community, all of it. It's not a quick fix, it's a complete transformation of how you relate to yourself and reality. But here's the beautiful part. You don't have to wait until you're fully enlightened to benefit from this. Every moment of mindfulness, every time you catch yourself creating suffering and choose differently, every time you recognize you're not your thoughts, you're already freer. You're already suffering less. The path and the goal aren't separate. Every step is both the journey and the destination. And unlike existentialism, which puts the burden entirely on you to create meaning in a meaningless void, Eastern philosophy says there's a natural state of peace and wholeness that you can access. You're not making something out of nothing. You're uncovering what's already there. You're removing the obscurements, the layers of conditioning and ignorance that hide your true nature. And that's actually easier than constantly having to construct and maintain meaning. It's a relief. It's coming home. So if you're sitting there feeling existential dread, feeling like your life is meaningless and you're just going through the motions, maybe the problem isn't that you haven't found the right meaning yet. Maybe the problem is that you're looking for meaning in the first place. Maybe you're trying to be someone instead of realizing you already are everything. Maybe you're chasing happiness in objects and achievements, when happiness is the nature of awareness itself, just covered over by constant craving and aversion. The Buddha said it clearly. The cause of suffering is craving. The end of suffering is the end of craving. And the way to end craving is to see reality as it is, to see impermanence, to see suffering, to see non-self. And when you see clearly, craving naturally falls away, not because you force it to stop, but because you see it doesn't make sense anymore. It's like trying to eat a painted picture of food. Once you see it's just paint, you're not hungry for it anymore. And Advaita says, you are already free. You are already the absolute. You've just identified with a limited form and forgotten your true nature. And the moment you remember, the moment you see through the illusion, you're free. Not free to do whatever you want, but free from the bondage of thinking you're a limited separate self that needs to struggle and survive and prove itself. This is the Eastern answer to existential thrownness. Yes, you were thrown into samsara, but samsara is optional. Nirvana isn't somewhere else, it's here, now, when you stop creating suffering, when you stop grasping and resisting, when you rest as awareness itself instead of identifying with the contents of awareness. That's liberation. That's the end of existential dread. Not because you found meaning, but because you found yourself. And what you found is that you were never lost. So where does this leave us practically? You've still got a life to live, bills to pay, relationships to navigate, goals to pursue or not pursue, but you can do all of that from a different place. Instead of being driven by fear and craving, you can be motivated by clarity and compassion. Instead of trying to prove your worth, you can act from the understanding that your worth is inherent. Instead of seeking happiness in the future, you can recognize the peace that's already present. Start simple. 5 minutes of meditation a day, just sitting and watching your breath. When your mind wanders, come back. That's it. Don't make it complicated. And throughout your day, try to catch yourself when you're lost in thought, when you're worrying or judging or comparing. Just pause, take a breath, come back to the present moment. Notice what's actually here right now instead of the story you're telling about it. And when you're suffering, get curious. What am I believing right now? What am I craving or resisting? Can I just let this feeling be here without needing to fix it or get rid of it? You'll be amazed how often the suffering dissolves when you stop fighting it. And over time, with practice, you'll start to recognize that space of awareness more and more. You'll start to realize you're not the character in the story, you're the awareness in which the story appears, and that changes everything. Look, I get it, this is heavy stuff, and maybe you're not ready to question the reality of yourself, or commit to a meditation practice, or dive into ancient philosophies. That's fine, you don't have to do anything. But if you're feeling that existential dread, if you're tired of the hamster wheel of chasing meaning and achievement, if something in you recognizes that there's gotta be another way, then maybe it's worth exploring, not as an intellectual exercise, but as a lived practice, as a genuine inquiry into the nature of your own mind and the reality of your experience. Because here's the thing, all the philosophy in the world doesn't matter if it doesn't actually reduce your suffering. The Buddha wasn't interested in metaphysical speculation. He was interested in liberation. He was interested in ending suffering, and he claimed he found a way. And millions of people over thousands of years have followed that path and reported similar experiences. That's not proof, but it's at least worth investigating. Same with Advaita Vedanta. It's not asking you to believe something, it's asking you to look and see for yourself. Can you find this separate self you think you are? Can you find the thinker behind the thoughts? And if you can't, if all you find is awareness and sensations and thoughts arising in awareness, then maybe, just maybe, everything you've been told about who you are and what life is about needs to be questioned. So that's the Eastern response to being thrown into existence. You weren't thrown into a meaningless void where you have to create your own meaning. You were thrown into samsara, the cycle of suffering. But you can wake up. You can see through the illusion. You can realize your true nature and be free. Not free to do whatever you want, but free from the prison of your own mind, free from the constant anxiety and grasping, free from the need to justify your existence or prove your worth. And honestly, in a world that's becoming more and more anxious, more divided, more caught up in endless consumption and distraction, maybe this ancient wisdom is exactly what we need. Not as an escape from reality, but as a way to engage with reality more clearly, more compassionately, more fully. Because when you're not constantly defending and promoting your separate self, when you're not driven by fear and craving, you can actually show up for life. You can actually be present with other people. You can actually respond to what's needed instead of just reacting from old patterns. The existentialists were right that we're thrown into existence without a manual. They were right that there's no cosmic plan handed down from above. They were right that we have to take responsibility for our lives. But maybe they missed something. Maybe they were still too caught up in the Western obsession with the individual, with the ego, with the self that needs to heroically create meaning. Maybe the real freedom isn't in choosing your own meaning, but in seeing through the one who's choosing, in recognizing the awareness that's prior to all choice, all meaning, all identity. And look, you don't have to choose between East and West here. You don't have to reject existentialism to appreciate Buddhism. You don't have to become a monk to practice mindfulness. Take what's useful from both traditions. Use existentialism to recognize your freedom and responsibility. Use Eastern philosophy to recognize that the one who's free is not who you think it is. Use both to live a life that's authentic, awake, and actually less miserable than most people are experiencing. Because at the end of the day, that's what this is all about, reducing suffering, yours and everyone else's. The Buddha wasn't trying to build a religion or a philosophy, he was trying to solve a problem. The problem of dukkha, of unsatisfactoriness, of this constant low-grade anxiety that pervades human existence. And he found a solution, and it's been tested by millions of people across thousands of years, and it works. Not perfectly, not instantly, but it works. So if you take nothing else from this video, take this. Your suffering is optional. Not your pain, not your challenges, not your difficult circumstances, but the suffering you add on top of those things through your resistance, your craving, your identification with thoughts and emotions, that's optional. And there's a way out. There's a path. It requires practice, patience, and honestly some courage to question everything you think you know about yourself. But it's there. It's been there all along. You were thrown into samsara, but you don't have to stay there. The next video is going to blow your mind, so click that now.